The courtroom was supposed to be quiet that morning, another routine day, another routine hearing. But no one in that room, not even Judge Frank Caprio himself, expected what was about to unfold. One moment, the defendant stood nervously at the podium, and the next he exploded. His voice echoed through the chamber as he cursed directly at the judge, shocking everyone into absolute silence. The gasp from the audience was instantaneous. The clerk froze mid-sentence, and even Judge Caprio, known worldwide for his patience and gentle humor, paused in disbelief. This single moment would change the course of the defendant's life, and what happened afterward is something no one could have predicted. Welcome back to Swift Tale, your home for powerful, real-life stories that grip the heart and spark the mind. And if you're visiting for the very first time, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, because trust me, you don't want to miss stories like this. Have you ever wondered what happens when someone loses control in front of the most compassionate judge in America? Today's story shows exactly how quickly a situation can spiral, and why this one has become one of the most talked-about courtroom encounters ever. What starts as an angry outburst becomes a lesson in justice, consequences, and unexpected humanity. Let's dive into the moment everything changed. Judge Frank Caprio isn't just a name people recognize. He's a symbol of compassion in a world where justice often feels cold and mechanical. For decades, he has presided over the Providence Municipal Court with a unique blend of firmness and warmth that has earned him the title of America's kindest judge. To many, he isn't just a figure behind the bench. He's a voice of reason, empathy, and humanity. Viewers across the world admire the way he listens, really listens to the people who stand before him. Whether it's a single mother juggling bills, an elderly man struggling to understand the law, or a teenager making their first big mistake, Judge Caprio treats each person as if their story matters. Because to him, it truly does. Long before he became a viral sensation, Caprio grew up as the son of immigrants, learning firsthand what it meant to struggle, to work tirelessly, and to be treated with dignity despite hardship. His childhood experiences shaped his philosophy of justice, that compassion isn't weakness, it's wisdom. He often shares memories of his father, who taught him that every person deserves respect, no matter their circumstances. And as a judge, he has never forgotten that lesson. His courtroom is famously less intimidating than most. Instead of harsh lectures, he offers understanding. Instead of quick judgments, he asks gentle questions. And instead of humiliation, he gives people a chance to breathe, to explain, to be human. This is precisely why the incident in today's story is so shocking. Judge Caprio is known for his unwavering patience, yet he faced a moment where even his grace was tested. The clash becomes even more dramatic when you understand the type of man he normally is, a judge who has forgiven thousands of fines, who has brought people to tears with kindness, who has gone viral for turning punishments into opportunities for healing. Millions have watched his videos online, praising his ability to combine law with love, structure with empathy. And yet, even the kindest judge has boundaries. Even the gentlest heart can be pushed too far. Understanding Judge Caprio's legacy and reputation makes the defendant's explosive outburst even more unexpected, and the consequences even more intense. Today's story isn't just about an argument or a moment of disrespect. It is about the collision of two very different worlds, one shaped by decades of wisdom, understanding, and compassion, and the other shaped by frustration, pain, and emotional chaos. Before the storm erupted in the courtroom, Judge Caprio entered prepared, as he always was, to treat each case with fairness and humanity. He had no idea that one defendant would challenge the very core of his philosophy. And as we explore this moment, it's important to keep in mind the man behind the bench, a man who believes, above all else, in second chances. But sometimes, even second chances must wait. The defendant who would soon shock Judge Caprio's courtroom didn't wake up that morning planning to cause trouble. In fact, trouble had been chasing him for years, long before he ever stepped foot inside a courthouse. His name was Daniel Reeves, a man in his mid-30s whose life had been defined by missteps, bad luck, and unresolved anger simmering just beneath the surface. From the outside, he looked like someone who had simply given up, unkempt clothes, tired eyes, and the posture of a man carrying burdens no one else could see. But beneath that rough exterior was a story tangled with disappointment and heartbreak that had shaped him into the person he was on the day of the hearing. Daniel hadn't grown up with stability. His childhood was filled with arguments echoing through thin apartment walls, nights where dinner never came, and days where survival mattered more than school or dreams. His father walked out early in his life, leaving a young Daniel to navigate a world he didn't understand. His mother, overwhelmed and exhausted, worked multiple jobs and had little time to guide him. The lack of structure and support led him to fall into the wrong crowd, kids who understood anger better than peace and chaos better than comfort. These early influences carved deep grooves into his personality, grooves that years later would become nearly impossible to smooth out. As Daniel grew older, the consequences of his fractured upbringing began catching up with him. He struggled to hold steady jobs, often clashing with co-workers or leaving positions after heated arguments. His relationships never lasted long, friends drifted away, girlfriends left after realizing he carried too much emotional weight, and even his family eventually distanced themselves in an attempt to protect their own peace. Life became a cycle of brief opportunities followed by sudden failures. Every setback chipped away at his sense of self-worth until frustration became his default emotion. By the time he reached adulthood, anger wasn't just a reaction, it was his shield, his defense mechanism, his only language when the world felt unfair. The pressure only intensified when Daniel found himself dealing with financial problems. Bills piled up, overdue notices replaced regular mail, and debt followed him everywhere like a shadow he couldn't outrun. He tried to stay afloat, taking temporary work whenever he could, construction one month, warehouse loading the next, but nothing lasted. And each time he fell short, he blamed himself a little more. These struggles were the backdrop to the incident that finally led him into Judge Caprio's courtroom. A small mistake, something minor to most people, became the final straw for a man already at his limit. Days before the hearing, Daniel received a notice for a traffic and parking violation. Under normal circumstances, it would have been an inconvenience, but not a catastrophe. For him, though, it felt like the universe piling on. He was already behind on rent, already one step from losing his car, already fighting with his own mind every single day. The ticket triggered a meltdown he tried desperately to control. He knew he had to appear in court. He knew he had to face a judge. What he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was how volatile he had become. Every unhandled wound, every suppressed emotion, every moment he had been pushed down in life had built pressure inside him like a shaken soda bottle. And on the day he stood before Judge Caprio, that bottle was ready to burst. Daniel arrived at the courthouse late, sweating, anxious, and already irritated. He had barely slept the night before, replaying all of his failures in his mind. As he walked through the courtroom doors, he felt eyes on him, though no one was truly watching. His own guilt and anger made him believe everyone was judging him. The whispering from the back row wasn't actually about him, but in his fragile state, he thought it was. The sound of a clerk stamping papers felt too loud. The judge's calm voice felt too calm. Everything around him seemed to trigger memories of times he felt powerless and misunderstood. By the time his name was called, Daniel's emotions were hanging by a thread. He walked to the podium carrying years of resentment, frustration, fear, and hopelessness. He wasn't facing a simple traffic violation, he was facing every mistake he had ever made. And as he stood before Judge Caprio, he believed, wrongly, that he was about to be judged not for his actions, but for who he was. This internal storm would soon collide with the kind of compassion Daniel had never experienced before. Yet instead of calming him, it would ignite something far more dangerous. The incident that eventually dragged Daniel Reeves into Judge Caprio's courtroom began on a cold, gray morning that seemed to mirror the heaviness inside him. It was the kind of day where the sky looked like it could collapse at any moment, matching the weight of Daniel's thoughts as he hurried to work. He had recently taken a temporary job at a shipping depot, nothing glamorous, nothing stable, but it was something he desperately needed to keep the lights on at home. Barely making ends meet, he had no room for mistakes, no cushion for setbacks, no margin for anything to go wrong. Yet that morning, everything did. As Daniel pulled into the crowded downtown area, circling endlessly for a parking spot he could afford, stress began tightening around his chest. Time was slipping away. His shift was starting in minutes. Panic bubbled up as every block he drove seemed hopelessly full. Finally, in a moment of pure desperation, he parked in a space marked with faded yellow paint and a barely visible permit-only sign. It wasn't legal, he knew that. But at that moment, survival mattered more than rules. He leapt out of his car, promising himself he'd move it on his first break. It was a small gamble, one he thought he could manage. But life rarely bends for people already on the brink. By the time Daniel returned to move his car, a bright orange parking ticket was aggressively tucked under his windshield wiper. And not just any ticket. The vehicle had been entered for a possible tow due to previous unpaid violations. It was a nightmare scenario he neither expected nor could afford. With trembling hands, he snatched the ticket, scanning the fine. The amount was far higher than anything he could handle. It felt like the universe had singled him out again, reminding him that even small mistakes carried heavy consequences for people like him. Daniel's frustration escalated into rage. He kicked the tire of his car, cursed under his breath, and threw the ticket onto the dashboard. A passing parking enforcement officer witnessed his reaction and approached cautiously, informing him that he had multiple outstanding violations and that the car was flagged. The officer wasn't rude, just direct, but Daniel's fragile emotional state twisted those words into an attack. He felt cornered, humiliated, and powerless. The argument that followed grew loud enough to attract attention. Daniel's voice shook with anger as he insisted he was being targeted, while the officer attempted to calm him down. What should have been a simple moment, a warning, a fine, a brief confrontation, spiraled out of control. Daniel accused the officer of harassment. The officer threatened to call for police backup if Daniel didn't calm down. When two patrol officers arrived minutes later, Daniel was already trembling from the cocktail of anger and fear flooding his system. The officers didn't arrest him, but they issued an order for him to appear in court due to non-compliance and accumulating fines. They explained the situation clearly, but Daniel's mind was too clouded to truly understand. He heard only one thing, that yet again, life was punishing him. That night, sitting alone in his dimly lit apartment, Daniel stared at the court summons. The more he read it, the more resentment built inside him. He replayed the encounter with the officers over and over, convincing himself that everyone was against him. He felt like a man drowning with no one willing to throw a rope. And when he tried to find someone to talk to, family, friends, he realized how alone he truly was. His anger became his only companion, and with each passing hour, it grew louder, sharper, more desperate. In the days leading up to the court date, Daniel's anxiety overtook him. He lost sleep. He couldn't focus at work. He lashed out at coworkers for minor things. He felt like a balloon stretched to its limit. Every thought was tinged with paranoia. What if the judge doesn't listen? What if they tow my car? What if I end up losing everything? He convinced himself that the world expected him to fail, that the system wasn't designed to give people like him a chance. By the morning of the hearing, Daniel was mentally and emotionally exhausted. He blamed the ticket, the officer, the system, and ultimately himself. All of that tension, all of that unresolved turmoil, all of that pain had no outlet until he stepped into the courtroom. What should have been a simple hearing about a parking violation was about to explode into one of the most shocking moments ever witnessed in Judge Caprio's gentle courtroom. Daniel didn't realize it yet, but the incident that led him there was just the beginning. What happened next would mark a turning point in his life, one that would test every belief he held about justice, authority, and himself. The moment Daniel Reeves stepped into the courtroom, he felt a strange mix of heaviness and stillness in the air. The Providence Municipal Court was not an intimidating place compared to others. No towering columns, no harsh lighting, no echoing chambers designed to instill fear. Instead, it carried a quiet, respectful atmosphere, almost comforting in its simplicity. Sunlight streamed softly through tall windows, illuminating polished wooden benches and the familiar raised desk where Judge Frank Caprio presided over cases with a demeanor unlike any other judge in the country. It was a place where people often left with a sense of relief, not dread. But for Daniel, whose emotions were already on edge, even this calm environment felt threatening. As he took a seat near the back, his leg bounced nervously, tapping against the floor in rapid rhythm. He glanced around the room, watching others step forward to face the judge. Some were visibly nervous, some embarrassed, but many left smiling after hearing Judge Caprio's light-hearted comments and compassionate decisions. A young mother explained her ticket situation while her toddler babbled in her arms. The judge listened patiently, even making gentle jokes that made the room chuckle. An elderly man shuffled forward, apologizing repeatedly for his mistakes, and Caprio reassured him that everyone makes errors. These moments were heartwarming for the courtroom, but for Daniel, each display of kindness only tightened the knot in his chest. He didn't feel he deserved that kindness, and he certainly wasn't ready to receive it. The courtroom clerk read out names one by one, calling individuals to the stand. The shuffling of feet, the rustling of papers, and the soft murmurs of people whispering to each other formed a quiet symphony in the background. But for Daniel, every sound felt amplified. He interpreted whispers as judgment, laughter as mockery, and the peaceful atmosphere as something he was somehow out of place in. His mind was already working against him, twisting everything into something personal and hostile. Judge Caprio, seated at the bench, reviewed documents with his usual calm focus. Every so often, he lifted his eyes to address someone before him with warmth and patience. His gentle voice drifted across the room, soothing nerves and offering comfort. He had no idea that at the back of the courtroom sat a man whose emotions were primed like a lit fuse. If Caprio noticed Daniel at all, he likely saw just another troubled individual who needed guidance, a scenario he had encountered countless times before. But this time would be different. This time, the story unfolding in his courtroom would become one of the most unforgettable encounters of his career. As Daniel waited, his anxiety grew heavier by the minute. His palms were sweaty, his heart raced, and the weight of his life, his debts, his failures, his loneliness, pressed down on him with suffocating force. The longer he sat there, the more convinced he became that he didn't belong in a place where compassion was given so freely. He believed that someone like him didn't deserve understanding, that kindness was something he'd never been able to keep. He braced himself for humiliation, convinced that the judge would see right through him and treat him like the mess he believed himself to be. A few people sitting nearby glanced at him occasionally, noticing his tense posture and restless movements, but no one said a word. To them, he was just another person waiting for his case to be called. But inside, Daniel felt like he was about to fall apart, and every second brought him closer to that breaking point. Finally, the clerk called the name that made Daniel's stomach drop: Daniel Reeves. The simple sound of it echoed in his mind like a strike of thunder. Slowly, he rose from his seat, feeling dozens of invisible eyes on him. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself, but the wave of anxiety crashing inside him made it impossible. As he walked toward the podium, each step felt heavier than the last. Judge Caprio looked up, offering his usual warm and respectful greeting, but Daniel barely heard it. His mind was too clouded, his emotions too volatile. The judge's gentle tone, intended to put him at ease, instead collided with Daniel's inner turmoil in the worst possible way. The calm before the storm was over. With Daniel standing at the podium, trembling with a mixture of fear, resentment, and shame, the courtroom was unknowingly seconds away from an eruption that would leave everyone stunned. This section dives into the tense aftermath inside Judge Caprio's courtroom as the defendant's outburst continues to echo through the room. The judge, known for his calm temperament and compassionate approach to justice, takes a slow moment to collect himself before responding, a silence so heavy that even the spectators shift uneasily in their seats. The defendant, still visibly agitated, glares defiantly, but the energy in the room has shifted. What once felt like bravado now begins to resemble panic. Judge Caprio gently but firmly addresses the seriousness of disrespecting the court, explaining that a courtroom is not just a place for legal decisions, but a place where citizens are expected to uphold basic standards of conduct. He breaks down the importance of decorum, not as a tool to assert power, but as a symbol of fairness and justice. While speaking, the judge's tone remains controlled, almost fatherly, reminding everyone present, especially the defendant, that lashing out never leads to solutions, only consequences. The spectators watch closely as the defendant's expression falters, revealing brief flashes of regret behind the anger. In this moment, viewers experience the turning point, the shift from confrontation to clarity. The judge's words highlight how one reckless decision, fueled by emotion, can instantly transform a simple hearing into a life-changing moment. This section sets the stage for what follows, the consequences that unfold not because of the crime itself, but because of the defendant's explosive loss of respect and control in the presence of the court. In this section, the tension in the courtroom deepens as Judge Caprio prepares to make a pivotal decision. The defendant, now slightly calmer but still visibly shaken, watches nervously as the judge reviews the case file once more. What makes this moment so powerful is the contrast between the defendant's earlier aggression and the quiet intensity now filling the room. Judge Caprio looks up and begins explaining, step by step, how the court must respond when someone chooses to disrespect the judicial process. He outlines the legal consequences of contempt, emphasizing that the courtroom cannot function if chaos is allowed to replace civility. His voice is steady, carrying both firmness and disappointment, a tone that hits the defendant harder than any raised voice could. As the judge speaks, the reality of the situation finally sinks in for the defendant. He glances around the courtroom, noticing the silent stares of spectators who once viewed him as a hot-headed troublemaker, but now study him with a mixture of pity and disbelief. The defendant begins to visibly second-guess his actions, his earlier confidence slipping into regret. Judge Caprio pauses, giving him a final opportunity to explain himself, apologize, or show any sign of remorse. This moment is critical, as the judge is known for giving people chances to correct their mistakes. Yet the defendant's hesitation and pride create a heavy uncertainty in the air. This section emphasizes the emotional weight of accountability. It shows how one bad decision can quickly escalate from a simple misunderstanding to a defining moment in someone's life. Viewers see the internal struggle within the defendant, a battle between stubbornness and the dawning realization that he has pushed things far beyond what he can control. The entire courtroom seems to hold its breath, waiting to see whether he will make things right, or whether the judge will be forced to take the most serious action available under the law. In this section, the pivotal moment arrives, the moment when the defendant is given one final chance to change the course of his own fate. Judge Caprio, after outlining the seriousness of the courtroom outburst, leans forward slightly and speaks with a calm but commanding tone. He reminds the defendant that the justice system isn't built on intimidation or fear, but on respect, responsibility, and the willingness to acknowledge one's mistakes. The judge explains that many people enter his courtroom under stress, fear, or frustration, yet most still manage to maintain the basic respect that allows the legal system to function. He emphasizes that the defendant's behavior didn't just break a rule, it attacked the dignity of the entire courtroom. As the judge finishes speaking, all eyes shift back to the defendant, who now stands on the edge of a life-altering decision. The room is silent, no whispers, no movement, just the quiet anticipation of whether he will choose humility or stubbornness. For a brief moment, his expression softens, hinting at the possibility of remorse, but pride overrides reason. Instead of offering a sincere apology or explanation, he mutters something under his breath, something dismissive, barely audible, but enough for Judge Caprio to recognize that the defendant is still refusing to take responsibility. That small moment becomes the final straw. Judge Caprio's expression changes, not anger but disappointment. He announces that he has no choice but to enforce the legal consequences for contempt of court. The defendant's face drains of color as the reality of what he's triggered becomes undeniable. Officers in the courtroom take a step forward, signaling that the judge's decision is not just words, it's action. This section captures the exact turning point where the defendant's refusal to show accountability transforms a simple hearing into a life-changing sentence. It underscores the importance of emotional control, respect for the system, and understanding that sometimes just a few words, or the refusal to speak them, can separate freedom from imprisonment. This section zooms in on the dramatic moment when Judge Caprio officially orders the defendant into custody, sending shockwaves through the courtroom. The judge speaks with a tone that is steady and resolute, making it clear that his decision is not driven by emotion, but by the responsibility he carries to uphold order and justice. As the words, "You are hereby remanded," leave his lips, the defendant's posture changes instantly. The earlier defiance drains from his face, replaced by disbelief and fear, an expression that reveals he never truly expected things to go this far. He looks around the room, as if hoping someone will intervene or argue on his behalf, but the courtroom remains silent. This is the moment he realizes that no one, not the audience, not the officers, not even the judge, can undo what his own actions have caused. Two officers step forward, gently but firmly instructing him to place his hands behind his back. The clinking of the handcuffs echoes loudly in the otherwise silent courtroom, becoming a symbolic reminder of how a few careless, angry words can alter the course of someone's life. The defendant turns briefly toward Judge Caprio, perhaps to argue or plead, but the judge meets his gaze with calm certainty. There's no cruelty in his expression, only the solemn reality of a man who has given every opportunity for respect and reflection and received none in return. Spectators shift in their seats, some shocked, some murmuring under their breath, others reflecting on the gravity of what they've just witnessed. For many, it's a lesson unfolding in real time. The courtroom is not simply a place where laws are enforced, but where character is tested. And in this test, the defendant failed. The judge's decision stands as a reminder that justice is not only about punishment, it's about teaching accountability. This section powerfully portrays the raw consequences of letting anger speak louder than reason, and how the lack of even a small apology can tip someone's entire future into darkness. In the aftermath of the defendant's sudden incarceration, the courtroom settles into a tense, reflective silence. The spectators, still processing what just happened, begin whispering among themselves, sharing shocked glances and hushed commentary about the extraordinary scene they just witnessed. Some are outraged, others empathetic, but everyone recognizes the gravity of the moment. A man's life has been changed in an instant because he let anger override reason. Judge Caprio, ever composed, allows a brief pause before addressing the remaining individuals in the room, reminding them that while the law is firm, it is also fair and that respect and patience are as essential in the courtroom as truth itself. Meanwhile, the defendant, now escorted to holding, begins to grapple with the consequences of his actions. The initial shock gives way to a creeping realization that his choices, and only his choices, have led him to this point. In the holding area, he is left alone for a moment. The handcuffs a stark reminder of how quickly life can shift when control is lost. Panic and regret compete with lingering pride, creating a storm of conflicting emotions that overwhelm him. For the first time, he begins to consider the words Judge Caprio spoke, the quiet lessons embedded in the firm but fair judgment he received. This section highlights the internal struggle of facing immediate consequences and sets up the turning point for the story. It emphasizes how actions in a split second, especially when fueled by unchecked emotion, can ripple outward, affecting not only the individual but everyone around them. It also reinforces Judge Caprio's role as a compassionate enforcer of justice, someone who balances accountability with humanity, reminding viewers that every decision carries weight, and even moments of rebellion are lessons waiting to be learned. After the initial shock of the defendant's incarceration settles, Judge Caprio retreats briefly to his chambers, not out of anger, but to reflect on what just transpired. He reviews the case again, pondering the man's actions, his background, and the circumstances that led to such an explosive outburst. Judge Caprio, known for his compassion, understands that the courtroom is not only a place for enforcing laws, but also a space to teach life lessons. While the defendant's behavior was unacceptable, the judge recognizes the humanity behind it, the fear, frustration, and years of struggle that culminated in this moment. It's in this reflection that the twist emerges. He sees an opportunity not just to punish, but to guide. Minutes later, the courtroom is called back into session. The defendant is escorted in, visibly shaken and subdued, unaware of what awaits. Judge Caprio, calm and deliberate, addresses him directly, explaining that while his behavior could not go without consequence, there is room for redemption. He offers a rare second chance, emphasizing the power of remorse, accountability, and sincere apology. The defendant, stunned and overwhelmed, begins to grasp the magnitude of the opportunity he has been given. His earlier pride melts into genuine regret, and for the first time in the story, he truly reflects on his actions. Witnessing this exchange, the courtroom, previously tense and rigid, softens. Spectators feel a shift, recognizing that justice does not always manifest as punishment alone, but can include compassion and understanding when paired with personal responsibility. The defendant steps forward, voice trembling, and expresses sincere remorse, acknowledging both his disrespect and the deeper issues that led him there. Judge Caprio listens carefully, offering guidance without condescension, reinforcing the lessons of respect, patience, and humility. This section delivers a critical emotional and narrative turning point. The story transforms from one of immediate consequence into a tale of potential redemption. It demonstrates the judge's philosophy that even in the gravest moments, people can learn and grow if given the right guidance. Viewers witness the rare intersection of authority and empathy, where accountability meets humanity, and the defendant begins the difficult, yet transformative, journey toward understanding and personal growth. With the defendant now fully aware of the gravity of his actions, the courtroom atmosphere shifts from tension to reflection. Judge Caprio carefully explains the revised outcome of the case. While the contempt of court cannot be ignored, he has chosen to offer a measured resolution that allows the defendant to make amends and begin rebuilding his life. The sentence is adjusted, taking into account his sincere remorse, willingness to learn, and the broader context of his struggles. In this moment, the courtroom witnesses a rare balance of justice and compassion, firm accountability paired with the opportunity for redemption. The defendant, Daniel Reeves, feels a mixture of relief, shame, and gratitude. He realizes that his actions could have permanently derailed his life, yet through humility and acknowledgement of wrongdoing, he has been given a chance to change. This marks the beginning of a personal transformation. He commits to addressing the root causes of his anger, taking responsibility for his decisions, and actively seeking to restore trust and stability in his life. For the first time, he sees that respect and self-control are not just expectations imposed by others, but tools for his own survival and growth. The courtroom spectators, many of whom were initially shocked by his outburst, watch as the defendant leaves the bench with a new sense of purpose. Some offer quiet nods of encouragement, others whisper reflections about the profound lessons just witnessed. Judge Caprio's measured response not only reinforces the power of empathy within the justice system, but also demonstrates the broader life lesson. Mistakes can serve as turning points when met with accountability and willingness to change. This section underscores the transformation theme central to the story. It highlights the importance of learning from one's mistakes, taking responsibility, and embracing second chances. The defendant's journey from impulsive anger to reflective growth provides a compelling, emotional arc that resonates deeply with viewers, leaving them with both a sense of closure and hope. Once the courtroom drama concludes, the story doesn't remain confined to the walls of the Providence Municipal Court. News of the defendant's explosive outburst, followed by Judge Caprio's rare act of compassion, spreads rapidly. Social media lights up with clips, comments, and debates, and the story quickly goes viral. People across the country, and eventually around the world, react with astonishment, empathy, and admiration. Many viewers are shocked by the defendant's initial disrespect, yet an equal number are inspired by the judge's ability to balance accountability with mercy. The footage sparks discussions about justice, respect, and human behavior, with thousands sharing their own thoughts and experiences online. News outlets pick up the story, highlighting Judge Caprio's thoughtful handling of an intense situation. Interviews with legal experts and psychologists analyze both the defendant's emotional outburst and the judge's compassionate response, noting how the encounter has become a teaching moment for citizens everywhere. Social media users create posts, memes, and heartfelt reflections, emphasizing lessons about patience, accountability, and personal growth. The story resonates particularly with those who have struggled with anger or impulsive behavior, illustrating how small decisions can have life-changing consequences. Amid the viral attention, the defendant himself becomes aware of the reach of his actions. Watching clips of the courtroom moment and reading online reactions, he begins to truly internalize the impact of his behavior, not just on himself, but on the wider public who now sees him as an example of both failure and redemption. He reflects deeply on how anger and pride nearly cost him his future, and the viral nature of the story becomes a tool for self-awareness and transformation. This section emphasizes how a single, dramatic incident can extend beyond its immediate setting to influence and inspire a broader audience. The combination of viral media attention and Judge Caprio's compassionate approach turns a personal moment into a universal lesson, that accountability, humility, and second chances are values worth observing, sharing, and learning from. The story of Daniel Reeves and Judge Caprio is more than a dramatic courtroom incident. It's a powerful lesson in behavior, respect, and the value of second chances. For the defendant, the moment of cursing at the judge became a turning point, a stark reminder that actions, no matter how brief or impulsive, carry real consequences. The courtroom became a microcosm of life itself, illustrating how emotional control and respect for others are not just societal expectations, but tools for personal survival and growth. Daniel's journey shows that acknowledging mistakes and facing accountability head-on is essential for redemption, and that genuine remorse can open doors even when initial behavior seems unforgivable. For viewers, the story highlights universal truths. Losing control in a moment of frustration can have irreversible effects, but the willingness to reflect, apologize, and learn can redirect a life onto a more positive path. Judge Caprio's handling of the situation demonstrates that justice is not solely about punishment. It's also about education, understanding, and guiding people toward better choices. His approach underscores that compassion, combined with firm boundaries, creates an environment where individuals can truly recognize their missteps and make meaningful changes. The broader message resonates beyond the courtroom. It reminds people to consider how they respond to stress, anger, or provocation, and to weigh the consequences of words spoken in haste. Respect, both for oneself and for others, is fundamental, and small acts of reflection and humility can transform not just individual lives, but the communities they touch. By blending authority with empathy, accountability with understanding, the story illustrates that redemption is possible for anyone willing to face the truth, learn from their errors, and embrace opportunities to grow. Ultimately, this section ties together the emotional, moral, and societal lessons of the story. It leaves viewers with a clear takeaway: mistakes are inevitable, but the choice to learn, respect, and seek redemption defines character and can turn even the darkest moments into paths of hope and transformation. As the courtroom drama of Daniel Reeves and Judge Caprio draws to a close, the story leaves a lasting impression about accountability, personal growth, and the power of second chances. What began as a moment of impulsive anger and disrespect transformed into an unforgettable lesson in humility and redemption. The defendant's journey, from defiance to regret, from incarceration to reflection, illustrates that even the gravest mistakes can become turning points when met with responsibility and a willingness to change. Judge Caprio's measured response reinforces that true justice balances authority with empathy, teaching not only the defendant, but everyone who witnesses the event about the value of respect, patience, and understanding. For viewers of Swift Tale, this story is more than entertainment. It is a reminder that every action carries weight, and every choice shapes the trajectory of one's life. Moments of anger or frustration can escalate faster than we anticipate, and it is how we respond to these challenges that defines our character. The courtroom may seem far removed from everyday life, but its lessons are universal. Taking responsibility, reflecting on our behavior, and showing humility are essential steps toward growth and redemption. If you were captivated by this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Swift Tale so you don't miss our future tales of real-life drama, transformation, and inspiration. Comment below and tell us, what would you have done if you were in the defendant's shoes? Could you have kept your composure, or would you have acted the same? Stories like this remind us that life is full of difficult choices, and the path we take can change everything, for better or worse. Thank you for watching, and remember, every moment is an opportunity to learn, grow, and inspire others.